On August 9, 1969, actress Sharon Tate and 4 others were murdered in Tate's house in Benedict, California. They were all murdered in a vicious way. The crime scene looks like a horror movie, as the walls were covered in writing with Sharon's blood. The killers were part of the Manson family, led by infamous Charles Manson. Most people believe that the reason for the murders was the helter-skelter ideology. Manson believed that there was a race war coming and told the family to carry out the murders and make it look like radicals did it. However, during a prison interview, Manson said that the helter-skelter motive was fabricated and that the real motive was much more darker. The murders that were done by the Manson family brought an end to the love and peace hippie movement that took place in the 1960s. So why did these murders happen, and what was the motive for them? Sharon Tate was born on January 24, 1943 in Austin, Texas. As a teenager, she became interested in psychiatry, but then decided to go into film. She starred in a few movies beginning in 1961, however, her roles went uncredited. Her career started to take off when she starred in the 1966 movie Eye of the Devil. She also modeled for several magazines. She met Roman Polanski while filming for Eye of the Devil in London in 1965. They didn't fall in love at first, but eventually did while filming for Polanski's 1967 film The Fearless Vampire Killers. They married in London on January 20th, 1968. During that year, she began working on a movie called Rosemary's Baby. The film follows Rosemary Woodhouse, played by actress Mia Farrow, who is a pregnant woman, who, unbeknownst to her, is holding the spawn of Satan in her womb. The movie was released on June 12th of 1968. In December of the same year, Sharon became pregnant with their first child. The last movie that she would do was the 1969 film 12 Plus 1. On August 8, 1969, Sharon and her 2 friends were at her house in Benedict, California. Polanski hadn't returned from London on the day that he said he was going to return. Later that evening, she went to the El Coyote restaurant. She was with Jay Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, and Abigail Folger. They returned to Sharon's home at 150 CeeLo Drive at 10:30 p.m. A little after midnight, 4 members of the Manson family, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Charles Tex Watson, began their attack on Sharon and her friends. Tex Watson climbed a telephone pole and cut telephone access to the house to prevent Tate from calling the police. They approached the main fence but didn't climb in fear that there was an alarm. They climbed an embankment which led to the house. They saw headlights approaching, so Tex Watson instructed the ladies to hide in the bush while he went to the car. In the car was 18-year-old Stephen Parent. He was there to visit his friend, who was a caretaker of the house. Tex slashed his hand and shot him 4 times in the chest in point-blank range, which killed him. Tex cut a hole in the window screen and made his way in. He then let Susan and Patricia in, while Linda was on lookout. The 3 woke Wojtek, who was sleeping on the couch. When Wojtek asked who he was, Tex said, quote, "I am the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business," end quote. Tex then instructed the 2 to find Sharon and Jay and bring them to the living room. Tex wrapped a rope around Sharon and Jay's necks, tied them together, then threw the rope over a ceiling beam. Jay was shouting at Tex because of the way she was treating Sharon. Tex then shot Jay and stabbed him several times. Wojtek was able to escape, but Susan jumped on him and stabbed him in the leg. He was able to escape her, but Tex caught up with him and pistol whipped him many times. The gun began to fall apart because of how hard he beat him. Tex then stabbed Wojtek and shot him twice. Due to the horrifying racket from the house, Linda went to the house and lied to the family members by telling them that they had been made and told them that people were heading towards the house. Abigail escaped Patricia, then fled towards the pool area. Patricia caught up with her, tackled her, and then stabbed her. She, along with Tex, stabbed Abigail 28 times. A moving object caught Tex's eye. It was Wojtek, who was crawling on the lawn. Tex went over to him and stabbed him to death. In all, Tex stabbed Wojtek 51 times. Sharon Tate was the only one left alive, who was still tied up in the living room. Tate begged them to keep her alive long enough to have her baby. She offered herself up as hostage. However, the Manson family did not want that. Susan or Tex, or possibly both, murdered Tate. She was stabbed a total of 16 times. Susan said that Tate cried out, quote, "Mother, mother," as she died. Before the murders, Charles Manson told him to leave a sign and to, quote, "make it something witchy." Susan grabbed a towel, soaked it in Sharon's blood, and wrote "pig" on the front door of the house. The housekeeper came across the house in the morning. Polanski was informed of the murder and returned to Los Angeles. Him and the police struggled to find a motive for the attacks. The most popular motive behind the murders, and the one that most people believe is the true motive, is the Terry Melcher motive. Terry Melcher was a musician, record producer, and was the son to Doris Day. Charles Manson's biggest dream was to get a record deal. He was introduced to Melcher in 1969 at a party that Beach Boys member Dennis Wilson was hosting. Terry agreed to hearing Manson, but Terry never came through. Terry Melcher was the previous owner of 150 CeeLo Drive before Tate and Polanski. The murders were potentially a message to Terry, as Terry was believed to be on the Manson family hit list. Charles Manson knew that Terry didn't live there anymore because he visited the house on March 23, 1969. He was greeted by a photographer known as Sharon Tate. Manson asked Hatami if Melcher lived there. He told Manson that Terry didn't live here. He returned to the house later on that day and ran into the property owner, Rudy Adabelli. Rudy told Charles that Terry moved to Malibu, so clearly Melcher didn't live at the address anymore. The next motive was a drug empire motive. This motive suggests that Helter Skelter was a ruse to keep the female members under control of Tex and Charles while they built a drug empire. Charles Manson was a musician, but he didn't earn a lot of money from it because he did not have a record deal. Paul Watkins, a member of the family, claimed that Charles had $3,000 to $5,000 cash in hand and had stash houses holding $30,000 to $40,000 in cash. Today, that would be around $250,000. The Manson family lived at the Spahn Movie Ranch in Los Angeles. George Spahn, the owner of the ranch, allowed the family to stay there in exchange for labor. The family owned several vehicles, including a VW minivan, a Fiat, a 1950s Ford, a cake truck, a customized school bus, and many dune buggies. Where did they get all this money? In a prison interview with Charles Manson, Manson was asked about his work before he was locked up. He told him that he made money via the underworld. Tex Watson gave money to the family by different business ventures. Tex Watson owned a wig shop called Love Locks and sold drugs as well. Jay Sebring was a hairdresser for Star and another victim to the Manson family, Rosemary LaBianca, who sold wigs in a dress shop. Love Locks closed after 6 months, so Tex began to sell drugs as his main source of profit. According to a book written by David McGovern titled Program to Kill, Wojtek Frykowski and Abigail Folger were involved with trafficking of hallucinogens. Wojtek secured a deal which would make him a major distributor of a drug known as MDA. MDA is a psychedelic known as the love drug, which is similar to MDMA, known as ecstasy. In a book titled Helter Skelter, it told that an autopsy found that Wojtek and Abigail had MDA in their systems. Small amounts of MDA were found around the crime scene. Susan Atkins claimed that Linda Kasabian instructed Susan to go with her and Tex Watson to Beverly Hills because someone owed them $1,000. Susan also said that nor she, Tex Watson, or Charles Manson knew who lived there. However, both Charles and Tex visited the house before, so they knew who lived there. On page 24 of the Manson file, written by Nicholas Schreck, it said that a New Jersey underworld figure, Joel Rostow, gave a large amount of mescaline and cocaine to Frykowski and Sebring. On pages 540 and 541, the book links Sebring to a mafia member in New Jersey, Abner Zwillman. It says that Jay rented a New Jersey property on Eastern Drive, which was owned by the Genovese family. Zwillman was connected to the family and was even Joel Rostow's uncle. Charles Manson had connections to the Genovese family. In the Manson file book, Charles Manson became friends with a mafia member, Alvin Karpis, in Washington State. Alvin wrote a letter to Frankie Carbo, a family associate. He told Carbo to keep an eye out on Manson and to look out for him. In a 1988 interview with Journal de Rivera, Manson said, "I knew Frankie Carbo. Frankie Carbo knew Leno LaBianca." In a book titled The Shadow over Santa Susana, it stated that Leno was a chronic gambler with a $500 a day habit. In Programmed to Kill, Rosemary LaBianca was a trafficker of methamphetamine. In a blog post by a blogger known as Extel, it said that she used her dress shop to launder money and move drugs. It also claimed that she would move drugs to other wig shop owners. The believed theory is that Tex Watson was the main one behind the murders. He and Charles Manson, with the mob connections, were wanting to start a drug operation. They went to the Tate house to either make a deal or rob them of $40,000, which is owed to Joel Restau. There is not much evidence to back this theory up, except the drugs at the scene of the crime and the MDA found in Frykowski and Folger's system. People who believe this theory believe that the police covered up this crime to protect high-profile stars. Other people believe that the media only told the hippie cult side of the family in order to bring an end to the hippie movement. The last motive is the Satanist cult motive. While the police searched Tate's house, they found photographs and tapes that showed satanic sacrifices. However, these photographs were from the movie Eye of the Devil. There were also rumors of a tape containing a four-way orgy including Yul Brynner and Peter Sellers. Charles Manson spoke about the tape in an interview.
For Rosemary's Baby, they was the cult. Did they tell you about all the film that they got with the dogs and the chauffeurs that came out of the black and white when Yul Brynner and Peter Sellers paid $30,000 to get the videotapes back that they had done with the pornography, where they was gobbling on each other's knobs in the closet with Sharon, poor Sharon, beautiful Sharon? I'll give you something that may be...
Dennis Hopper told the LA Press that, quote, Sharon Tate had fallen into sadism, masochism, and bestiality, and recorded it. 25 people were invited to a house for a mass whipping of a dealer who had given them bad dope, end quote. In the Sammy Davis Jr. book titled Why Me, he told a story of when he went to a party. In 1968, there was a party hosted by the Church of Satan. All attendees were wearing robes and masks. They were all surrounding a naked woman who was chained on an altar. One of the people in the robes tilted his hood back and revealed himself to be Jay Sebring. An article referencing a book titled Sharon Tate, A Life, told that Roman Polanski allegedly forced Sharon into threesomes and filmed orgies at their house. It also claimed that Roman refused to have sex with Sharon after she became pregnant and told her to have an abortion. According to John Todd, a conspiracy theorist, Sharon Tate was involved in a satanic group that she did not approve of and wanted out, and so she was murdered for it. John Todd also claimed that Manson was given $50,000 from Toronto to New Orleans in order to kill Tate, but he only received $2,000 of it. It was rumored that Polanski filmed snuff films of children at a secret filming location in Laurel Canyon. In 1977, Roman Polanski was arrested for sexual acts upon a 13-year-old girl. He pled not guilty, but then took the lesser punishment for engaging in unlawful sexual intercourse. Roman fled to France and has since been living there in fear that other countries might extradite him to the U.S. Was Sharon Tate involved with Satanism? Was Sharon Tate a message to Terry Melcher? Was Charles Manson trying to build a drug empire? Charles Manson passed away in prison on November 19, 2017 due to cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, and colon cancer. He was 83 years old. We may never find out the true motive behind the killings. If we do, then it will finally give us closure on why Sharon Tate was murdered in the first place, and give us the answers to a murder that took place in such a controversial and confusing time in the United States.